I've been checking my levels. Everything looks good. What do you think about that, Fred? You like that? Whoa. Hey, chill out. Lay down. Take a nap. Lay down. Lay down. Good boy. All right, Fred. Let's get working on this car. Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be working on something I've been putting off for months. My brakes. Alright, so this is my 97 Miata and I'm going to be doing the front and rear disc brake replacement. These are, let's see, these are DBA Rotors and Hawk HPS brake pads, and the pads are worn pretty low, and especially on the rear. The rear is really starting to make a lot of noise, and those pads are just worn super thin. I believe on the passenger side it's actually cutting into the rotor a little bit, so these definitely need to be replaced. So I'm going to show you how I do a brake job. So I'm going to be replacing my pads and rotors with the new Hawk Performance Sector 27 brake kit. Basically this is just new rotors and pads. I've been using Hawk Performance pads for a long time on multiple different cars, but I've never used their rotors before. I believe this is a new product for them, and now they're selling them as a kit together, which is kind of cool because, you know, the pads are designed to work specifically with these rotors. They will work with any rotors, but they are tested with these Hawk Performance rotors. So we'll see if we notice any improvement or, you know, any difference at all. Also, as you can tell from the picture, these are going to be drilled and slotted for that hot boy look. I don't personally believe that a street car like mine is going to notice any difference with slotted and drilled rotors. You know, if you get some cheap blank ones from AutoZone or wherever, you know, they're probably just as good for a low performing car like a Miata. Now, do they really make a difference in the long run as far as like a high performance car, like these supercars and hypercars? I have a feeling they probably do. And if you think about it, if you're building a performance car, you know, I'm talking like an extreme car, like a Koenigsegg or even some Lamborghinis and Ferraris and whatnot, where money isn't an option and they want the best performing parts, you're not going to ever see just blank rotors. I've always seen the slotted and drilled rotors. So from a performance aspect, I'm assuming the R&D guys from these hypercar companies know why they're putting on slotted and drilled rotors on these high performing cars. So there's got to be some performance to it with their testing, so I'll trust that it does something. But like I said, don't feel like you need to get slotted and drilled rotors for your Miata. Not going to tell a difference at all. Even if you track it, I really doubt you're going to notice any cooling on the brakes or anything like that. It's probably a minimum, but whatever. They look cool, so do whatever you like. It's always a good idea to do an inspection of what's underneath the car here. Something I've noticed on this brake line that I've replaced, you see some wear. Looks like the tire's probably been rubbing on this when I corner. So I'll see if I can maybe loosen this up and move this up a little bit just to see if I can get that to move this brake hose out of the way. But yeah, so I'm going to start with the front brakes here, and we're basically going to remove some of the slider bolts here to get the caliper off, and it's a pretty easy job. So don't feel like you have to take it into a shop to do your brakes. This is totally something that you can do by yourself with basic hand tools. So let's go ahead and get started. So what I'm doing is I'm removing this top slider bolt out. This is going to be a 14 millimeter. And once you get the threads undone, the rest just slides out. You see that this is smooth. So this is the top bolt. There is a bottom bolt also, but you don't need to undo this one. It's built into the caliper, kind of. It's a 17 millimeter, and you'll be fooled into thinking you need to remove it, but all you really have to do is move the caliper, and it's also a slider bolt, so it just slides out like this. So you don't actually need to remove this bolt. The only bolt you need to remove is the top 14 millimeter, and that's it. So then you're going to set your caliper up on top like this, because you don't want to leave it hanging on the floor by your brake hose, because that can distress your hose and cause problems down the road, which we don't want. Okay. Alright, so now notice that these are the pads. If you have never done this before, now's a good time to get your phone out and take pictures of the orientation of these clips, these little retaining clips for the pads. They basically keep tension away from the rotor, just to help with eliminate some of the squeaks and noises from brake pads. Also notice that there's going to be some little tabs here, metal tabs that hold the pads in. It's normal if these pop off when you're removing the pads. You just put them back on. If they're missing or damaged, they are a replaceable item that you can get if you just need to rebuild your caliper. I've seen kits that come with just these tabs and clips here, so don't worry about that. But really, to remove these, you just kind of pull them off. They look like this. Just remember that they go on like that. Same with the bottoms. And that's the clips. Just pull these out like that. And I usually do a quick inspection of the pads. The fronts aren't too terribly bad. The rotors do feel pretty worn in though. I can actually feel the lip around the top here poking out of the rotors. I've been more impressed with the pads lately than rotors. So I'm hoping these new Hawk rotors perform better. See, here's one of those metal clips. They just slide back in on the caliper here. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is remove this carrier part from the caliper. It's part of the caliper. It's called a carrier that has two bolts here. These are both 14 millimeters, and once we remove those, this part will come off and we'll have access to the rotor. right. Okay, so now's a good time, if you have the time, to clean up parts of your caliper, inspect these rubber boots, make sure there's no rips or tears. And these look to be in pretty good condition. Probably hose them off, or I don't know, use some brake clean on these. But now we have the rotor, and it looks like the rotor is a little bit seized on here. So there's a few things you can do to get the rotor off. You could go caveman style and just beat the hell out of it with a hammer until it comes off. But I've got a little trick here I wanted to show you guys. Alright, so in the trunk of most Miatas, you're going to have this little area here. This is your jack. This is what came from the factory. And this is the factory location where it belongs, in case you were wondering. This here is the rod that you use on the jack, and this is the actual jack itself. So you take this little piece that holds in your jack. Go around here. Now take a look at your rotor, and you'll see right here there's a hole with the perfect size threads. So we're going to just crank on this for a little bit till this pops right off. Now if this thing is really seized on there, you may still need a hammer just to whack it on the sides like this, but by just turning this, mine wasn't on too bad. You see how it's lifting one side of it here? That helps at least get it broke loose on at least one side, makes it easier to undo the other side. So now I can back this off since it's broke loose. Alright, and the rotor comes off now. Now look at this, you see how it's just totally wearing away in here? That's just rust. So when I put the new one on, I'm going to clean this up a little bit and then put the new rotor on, put some anti-seize or something like that around here just to help keep it from sticking to this hub next time. And this is how Because Miata cleans up this mess, because power tools. Alright, so I cleaned up the hub a little bit with the wire brush just to get some of the rust off. I did not have any anti-seize paste available, and that's what you would normally smear around the hub. I did have the white lithium grease that I use all the time for a lot of things. Now, don't think that this is going to keep it from seizing up in the future. This is just a little tiny bit of protection. I mean, you could use Vaseline and it'd be better than nothing. This is just something to kind of keep the new rotor from sticking to the hub as best I can. The stuff you really want to get though is the anti-seize paste. That stuff does a pretty good job of keeping it from getting rusted onto it. And these are the new rotors. Beautiful. Now, from my past experience with rotors, rotors come with like some sort of a super thin layer of oil or something on them, just from the cutting machine left over, also to help inhibit it from rusting while it's in the warehouse and during shipment and all that. So you want to take the plastic off, get the rotors out, and just spray them down with brake clean just to kind of get it whatever film of oil is on these, and do that before you install it, and you should be pretty good. And just so you know, this kit is assembled here in the US, so it's not outsourced somewhere. I know some of you guys are concerned about that kind of thing now with everything going on, but they're made here. They should be pretty good quality. They're actually labeled which side to put these on. So I'm not doing the passenger side yet. So I'm gonna set these over here. And here's the driver's side. Let me go ahead and clean them off and put them on. Alright, so now that I've got the rotor on here, it's not bolted down or anything like that. It's just held on by the caliper, so you don't have to worry about that. But we're going to grease up the slider pin. You see the smooth part of the caliper? You're going to use caliper grease for this. So the caliper grease will help it stay lubricated when it's trying to slide when you're braking. Also note that the piston of your caliper needs to be pushed back to accommodate the size of the new rotor with the new fully filled in pads. So you could use a tool to crank them back. I usually just, do it man style and just kind of push them. See if that does it good enough. If not, I will crank them back. If you're having trouble with that, you could also take the top off of the brake reservoir just to relieve some pressure within the hydraulic system. We're basically just assembling everything back in the order that we took it off. So I'm going to put the regular bolts, not the slider bolt, the regular 14 mil bolts into the back of the hub, and that goes through this carrier, and it should go in finger tight most of the way. You don't want to cross thread these. It's just easier for me to do it this way than to get a wrench back there. It's kind of tight on the top bolt. There we go. Alright, it's not going anywhere. So now that we can put this back together, we're going to grease this slider bolt up with the brake caliper grease. Just slide it in through this bottom joint here. There you go. Now you can just let it rest like that. I'm going to next get the new pads, put them in. Pads come with brake lubricant. I've got my own that I've been using for a while. It's the exact same stuff, really. Save this for later for when I'm in need of it. And I'll just keep using this one up. Okay, these are the new pads here. The rule of thumb I use for applying this is just rub it on the areas that makes physical contact with the caliper, because that's really what it is for. It's just to help eliminate a lot of the noise, the squeaks and stuff that are associated with brakes. It's just a friction thing, so use it on all the points where you have it touch the caliper, like this part and on the sides here, and anywhere else you see that may touch the caliper. Spots here on the side. And notice the little extension part here goes along the hub. That's the way you face these in. Check. So see where this part is of the caliper. Some people put the lubrication here as well, so I'll do that too, just to show you what I'm talking about. On here, on here. I'm going to do the same with the other end. This side you can put some on the middle because this is where the piston's actually going to be pressing. Let's go around a circular like that. Okay, so once you get the caliper on, you're going to grab your slider bolt. A little bit more caliper grease on there. And slide it in through the top. And just start to thread it in by hand at first. And then you can tighten it down with your ratchet. And that is it for the front brakes. Now the rear brakes are a little bit different, and that's mainly because you have an emergency brake attached to them. But they're very easy to do. They may be even easier than the front brakes. You don't need to push back the caliper, the piston in the caliper. There's actually a hole in the back of the caliper here that's got a bolt that covers it up. But once you take off the bolt, it's an Allen key that you can wind it back with the Allen wrench. So it's a pretty easy job too. Let's go ahead and get this one knocked out and I'll show you. Alright, so the first thing you need to do to take this rear caliper off is remove this dust boot that covers the bottom bolt. It just pops off. It doesn't unscrew or anything. You just wiggle it off. And that's just a dust cover. This bottom bolt though is going to be a 10 millimeter, and it's a little tricky to get to it because the parking brake tends to get in the way. So I'll see if I can get a ratchet back there, but I've got a pretty thick ratchet head here. It doesn't look like it's going to want to fit. I do have a ratcheting wrench here that I can probably use. Main problem with these is there's a rubber shroud around this bolt, and you kind of have to push it back a little bit with your ratchet to get to it. So let's see. Gonna need some leverage. I need almost like a breaker bar to get it off because it can get seized pretty good on there. Let's see what I can figure out here. So we need to get leverage, and it's kind of hard to do that when you can't put a ratchet on there. So I'm going to try to see if I can force some leverage on here. Alright, so I've got my 10 mil on, and I've got another wrench here to add some leverage. This is an old mechanic trick I learned years ago. If you don't have a breaker bar. There we go. See? All I needed was a little bit of leverage, and that's how you get it off. All right, so I've got the new rotor on, and just need to put the caliper back on. But before we do that, I wanted to show you guys something about this caliper. This is the piston that we need to push back, but it's not like the front one where you can manually just kind of push on it with either a tool or with your hands. You actually have to dial it back with an Allen key. And it's this guy right here. This is just a cover. So I believe it's a 14 mil. Double check. Yes, it's just a 14 mil. So once you crack that open, it's not held on tight because it's not really holding anything on. It's really just a cover that keeps the fluid out. Okay, so there's your bolt. See, it's just a cover. It's not long enough to really hold anything secure. And inside there is an Allen key. So let me go get my Allen wrenches. You're just going to have to use trial and error to get these to work. Like, I've got a bag of wrenches here. It comes in a bag like this. They're not labeled. I don't know what size they are, but I just kind of use trial and error until I get one that fits. Maybe too big too. It's not a very big bolt at all. Okay, that one's a little too small. If any of you legends out there know what size it's supposed to be, put it in the comments below. I think I found it. And what I've been meaning to do, because I use this particular size so often when I do brakes, I've been meaning to wrap a piece of electrical tape around it so I automatically know which one it is. Don't do what I do and just forget stuff like that. Okay, yeah. This one's it. Alright, I've got a slight change of plans. I've been working on this rear caliper and it's just seized up beyond fixing. I just don't have the time to disassemble it and rebuild it, and I don't even know if it's worth rebuilding. So I just made a parts run and picked up a new caliper. You can get these at the local auto parts stores. I don't know how good of quality these are, but I will tell you they're Chinese made. They may be okay, but we'll see. I mean, it comes with all the boots and dust caps and everything you need. So we'll go ahead and give this a try. And hey, look what else I found. I know this says it's thread lubricant, but it's just copper paste that you can really put onto anything for keeping it from sticking. I put these on the hubs of my last car and they did really well. So it's a hot one out here today, boys. Let me tell you. Now, I didn't intend on having to replace that caliper, but you know, things happen. Once I replace it, then that also means I'm gonna have to bleed the lines. Wasn't really planning on that either, but I've got a power bleeder, so that shouldn't be too bad. I can still do it by myself, do it quickly. So let's go ahead and knock this out. Alright, so the first thing I did to this this caliper is remove the emergency brake cable, and you just basically loosen this bolt here with a 14mm spanner, and then this part just slides off the end. You just loosen it up and that's it. You do the reverse to put it back on the new one. I'll show you. You put the end of it here, and then you slide the cable here and just tighten up the bolt here. That's it. It's really easy. Now the only thing left holding this on is the brake line, so I'm going to remove that bolt and immediately put it on the new one. Take the new bolt off because I'm going to reuse the one that I've got here that came with my braided brake line kit. There's two washers here. One's going to go on the top and one's going to go on the bottom of the bolt. So I'm just going to get these ready here. And again, this should be a 14 millimeter on mine, and I have seen that these change based on where you got them from. This one came with the kit from my Flying Miata braided brake line. Alright, now that I've got this carrier on here, I'm going to go ahead and put the grease on the slider pin. This. Now I can take the caliper. Slide it on. All right. Now the brake kit, caliper kit, came with new hardware, so I'm going to go ahead and use that. Have all new stuff. These clips. Sit on it like that. Right. And that's how it goes in. See, the piston was pushed back already, so I don't need to push it back anymore. All I need now is my slider pin, which is already on here. Let me go ahead and grease it though. My hands are slippery from the brake stuff. Okay, so alright, yeah. Put just a little bit of this there. Not putting a lot, just enough to get it in there, which doesn't take much force at all. Okay. Now we can tighten it in. Comes with a new dust boot. Just pop that back on. And that Allen key that loosens up the emergency brake, that's also how you would adjust your emergency brake. If you pull up on your emergency brake and it's not clamping down, then you need to tighten up that Allen key back in the back of the caliper, and that'll close it up a little bit tighter. If you feel that it's too tight, you can also loosen it. All right, rear brakes are done, that's it. All right, and the rear brakes are done. This is the new caliper, all new hardware. And that's it. I only did the driver's side just to show you guys. So I'm gonna stop filming and do the exact same thing on the passenger side and call it a day. In case you're wondering how the rear clips are supposed to go, in case yours didn't have any or you've misplaced some, this is what the clip looks like, and this is the orientation. You put one end on one side, and notice that you don't even have to take the caliper off to put this clip in. It just sits on like this. Now, to get the other end in, I had to use some needle nose to kind of squeeze it to put it in. But you flip it upside down and you do it, same thing here on the bottom as well. Just like that. So, just thought that would be a helpful tip. Alright, so it's day 2 of the DIY brake job. And I had to stop yesterday early just because I had to go to work, but I have another car I can take, so it's not a big deal. I just finished the other side of the car and I just bled the brakes. I used my trusty power bleeder to do the one-man brake job. If you'd like to see how you can also do a one-man brake job with the power bleeder, I've got a video in this link above. So I've got everything buttoned back up and made sure my levels are filled up with new brake fluid. Now the final step is a procedure called bedding in the brake pads, and every manufacturer is a little bit different, so you'll need to refer to your manufacturer's website for the proper procedure on bedding in the pads to your rotors. It's basically a mating of your pads to your rotors, just to make sure they wear evenly and make good contact, and wears a slight film of pad off of the brake pad. And that's it. I'm gonna go on a couple test drives and call it a day. Anyways, I hope this video helped somebody, at least doing your brake job yourself. Pads and rotors aren't that difficult. I did run into one snag, which was a seized piston on my rear caliper, but I went to an auto parts store, got a new one. It's like 50 bucks, so not too bad of a casualty. So I've been driving the car for the past couple days since doing the brake job, and I'm actually pretty pleasantly surprised with the quality of these pads and rotors. Performance-wise, it stops pretty well, just as good as the last ones, which were also Hawk pads with DBA rotors, which are also a high quality. But these are a matched set. You know, they were made for each other. They do well. There's no squeaks or squeals. Listen. Very quiet stopping. No brake dust that I've seen so far. Of course, I will keep you guys up to date when I run into any issues, if there are any issues, but so far it seems like it's just a quality set of rotors and pads. So it's a win-win for me, and I would recommend them to anybody that's in the market to upgrade their pads and rotors. Thanks again for watching, guys, and once again, let me know if you liked the video by hitting that like button. And if you want to see more like this, you're going to have to subscribe. Take care, guys. Bye.